You think you understand true darkness? Think again. What if the forces of chaos weren't just a threat, but the unchallenged victor of every single war ever fought? In a galaxy of endless war, what if chaos didn't just win, but won every war? Brace yourself, because we're about to plunge into a vision of existence so bleak, so utterly consumed by the insidious nature of unchecked chaos, it will make your blood run cold. There is a place beyond the veil of sanity, where the Imperium of man no longer exists as anything recognizable. The golden throne sits cold and empty, its mechanisms silent, its purpose abandoned. The Emperor, if he still draws breath at all, does so in isolation, his will fractured across a reality that has ceased to listen. The Astronomicon does not shine. Terra itself has become a monument to defeat, its hive spires twisted into shapes that mock the Aquila, its foundries churning out weapons that will never be fired in righteous fury because there is no righteousness left to defend. This is not a sudden apocalypse, not some final battle where heroes fall with glory in their hearts. This is the slow, inexorable corruption of every wall, every principle, every whispered prayer that once held meaning. The first wars were fought with bolter and blade, with faith and fury. The sons of the Emperor stood upon battlefields soaked in the blood of traitors and heretics, and for a time it seemed as though humanity might endure. But chaos does not play by the rules of mortal conflict. Every retreat was a victory for the ruinous powers. Every Pyrrhic triumph planted seeds that would bloom into madness generations later. When a Space Marine chapter drove back a Black Crusade, they returned to their fortress monastery changed, their battle brothers whispering in their sleep, their chaplains finding symbols carved into the undersides of purity seals. When the Astra Militarum held a world against the tide of daemons, the survivors went home with visions that would not fade, with hungers that could not be named, with a certainty that their victory had been permitted, not earned. The Imperium still exists, but only as a shadow wearing the skin of what it once was. The bureaucracy continues because bureaucracy is all it knows. Administratum scribes still fill out requisition forms in triplicate, still calculate tithe grades for worlds that have long since stopped sending anything but screams across the Vox. On 1,000 worlds, planetary governors still sit in their palaces, still issue edicts, still maintain the fiction of imperial authority. But their words are hollow. The Arbites who enforce their laws do so with a cruelty that has ceased to be justice and become mere violence. The ecclesiarchy still preaches the glory of the God Emperor, but the sermons have changed. The faithful no longer pray for deliverance. They pray for the strength to endure one more day, for the mercy of a swift death, for the Emperor to grant them oblivion rather than salvation. The Space Marines have not been destroyed. That would be too clean, too final. Instead, they have been hollowed out from within. Chapters that once stood as bastions of humanity's defiance now serve purposes they can no longer articulate. They still fight. They still kill. But there is no enemy left that does not bear the mark of chaos, and in fighting such foes, they become what they destroy. A Dark Angel strike force pursues the fallen across a dozen systems, but when they finally corner their quarry, they find brothers who laugh at their pursuit, who reveal secrets so terrible that the hunters put bolter rounds through their own skulls rather than carry the knowledge back to the rock. A Blood Angel successor chapter wages war against a Slaneshi cult and emerges victorious. But the red thirst that follows is no longer a curse to be managed. It is a sacrament. The flesh they consume in their frenzy is willing, offered by mortal. Soldiers who have come to believe that being devoured by an angel of the Emperor is the highest honor left in a universe where honor has become indistinguishable from horror. The chapter master kneels among the corpses and realizes the truth too late. His brothers are not purging, they are feeding, and they will never stop. The Adeptus Mechanicus continues its eternal quest for knowledge, but the machine god no longer answers in the voice they remember. The Forges of Mars still produce, but what they produce has changed in ways subtle and profound. A pattern of lasgun that is 0.03% more efficient, but the soldiers who carry it begin to hear voices in the hum of the power cell. A new variant of the Lehman Russ battle tank with improved armor integrity, but the machine spirit inside it is no longer content to serve. It hungers. The tech priests who minister to these machines notice the changes, catalog them, incorporate them into the sacred texts of the Omnissiah, because to admit that something is wrong would be to admit that their entire faith is built on sand. A magos stands in the heart of a manufactorum, surrounded by servitors whose lobotomized brains have begun to dream. He observes their increased productivity with satisfaction, recording their output efficiency in his data slate with mechanical precision. He does not see the way their dead eyes track him when his back is turned. He does not hear the hymnal they speak in unison, a litany that was never programmed into their vocal processors, a prayer to something that is not the Omnissiah but wears its skin. When he finally notices, when he finally understands what his servitors are worshipping, he does not sound the alarm. He joins them. The steel in his body responds to a call older than the Imperium, and he walks into the furnace singing praises to the God in the machine. The Inquisition, that most necessary of evils, that final line of defense against corruption, has been compromised so thoroughly that its own members no longer trust each other. Inquisitors prosecute heresy with a zeal that has become indistinguishable from the very fanaticism they are meant to extirpate. An Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor burns a hive city to ashes because she detected the taint of chaos in the water supply, and she is correct. The water is tainted, but so is she. The voices she hears giving her orders are not the Emperor's. They never were. She will die convinced of her righteousness, and in dying, she will damn a dozen more worlds because her successor will read her reports and follow her example. An Ordo Xenos Inquisitor pursues a gene-stealer cult to the edge of the galaxy and exterminates it with ruthless efficiency. He believes his intuition led him to them, that centuries of service have honed his instincts to perfection. He does not understand that the whisper that told him where to find his prey came from the darkness between stars, that every success he has achieved has been orchestrated, that he is not hunting, he is being guided, and the thing guiding him has plans that make genestealer infection look like mercy. On the agri-worlds that feed the Imperium, the harvests continue, but the crops have changed. Grains that grow too quickly, vegetables that are too nutritious, livestock that breed without limit. The administratum adepts who receive these bounties record them as miracles of imperial efficiency, never questioning why hunger has not been eliminated despite such abundance. The answer is simple. The food is tainted, not with poison or disease, but with something more insidious. Those who eat it feel satisfied, but the satisfaction is false. They grow dependent, not on the food itself, but on the feeling it provides. Entire hive cities have fallen into stupor, their populations gorging themselves until they can no longer move, and still they eat, their mouths working mechanically, their eyes glazed with a bliss that is indistinguishable from damnation. The Departamento Munitorum sends regiments to investigate, and within a week, the soldiers are joining the feast. A commissar arrives to restore discipline and finds his men sitting in circles, feeding each other with trembling hands, tears streaming down their faces as they consume and never feel full. He draws his bolt pistol to execute the first man, and then he smells the food. Just once. That is all it takes. The Astra Militarum fights on because it knows nothing else. Guardsmen are born in the trench, raised in the trench, and they will die in the trench, but the enemy they face has ceased to be external. A regiment deploys to a war zone and discovers that the foe they have been sent to fight is another regiment of the Astra Militarum, equally convinced that they are the loyalists, equally certain that the Emperor demands the blood of traitors. They clash with a ferocity born of faith, and when the battle is over, the survivors cannot remember why they were fighting. A commissar executes a soldier for cowardice, and the men watching feel nothing. They have seen this 1,000 times. They will see it 1,000 more. The commissar himself no longer believes in the righteousness of his actions. He pulls the trigger because not pulling it would require a choice, and choice is the one luxury he cannot afford. The Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle, still wage their wars of faith, but their faith has curdled into something unrecognizable. They burn heretics with the same zeal they always have. But the definition of heresy has expanded to include anything that does not conform to their increasingly narrow vision of purity. A canoness leads her order in a crusade against a cardinal world because she has received a vision that the ecclesiarch there has been compromised. She is correct. The ecclesiarch is corrupt. But so is she. The vision did not come from the emperor. It came from something that finds her devotion amusing, something that enjoys watching her destroy the very thing she is meant to protect. Her sisters follow her without question, because doubt is heresy, and heresy is death. They sing hymns as they burn the cathedrals, as they execute the priests, as they reduce a world of faith to ash and bone. When the crusade is over, they kneel in the ruins and pray for forgiveness. Their prayers are answered, but not by the emperor. The voice that responds tells them they have done well, that their faith is strong, that they must continue the crusade to the next world, and the next, and the next. They obey. They always obey. And with each world they cleanse, the voice grows stronger. But then something happens, something that looks like hope. The ecclesiarchy announces a new saint, a young girl who performed miracles on a war-torn world, healing the wounded, driving back demons with her faith alone. Billions across the Imperium pray to her, and for a brief, shining moment, it feels as though the emperor is still watching over his people. The girl is canonized, her relics distributed to cathedrals across the galaxy, her image painted on the hulls of warships and the armor of battle sisters. Faith surges. Recruitment to the Adepta Sororitas triples. The faithful believe that this is a sign, that the emperor has not abandoned them. The truth is darker. The girl was real. Her faith was real. Her miracles were real. But the power that granted them did not come from the emperor. It came from something that needed her to be a saint, something that fed on the faith of billions, something that grew stronger with every prayer offered in her name. When the Inquisition finally discovers the truth, it is too late. The corruption has spread too far. They declare her a heretic posthumously, order her relics destroyed, her name stricken from the records. But the faithful do not believe them. They riot, they rebel, they form a schism that tears the ecclesiarchy apart. And, in the warp, something that wears the face of a young girl smiles. In the 41st millennium, hope is just another weapon of chaos. The Xenos races fare no better in this galaxy of perpetual defeat. The Tau Empire, once a beacon of progress and unity, has discovered that their greater good is not immune to the rot. They do not worship chaos. They do not even acknowledge its existence in any meaningful way, but they serve it nonetheless. The ethereals who guide their people have begun to change, their pheromone control becoming less subtle, their commands more absolute. The fire-cased warriors who once fought for a philosophy of expansion now fight because they are told to fight, and the distinction between order and compulsion has vanished. A Shazui leads her strike team into battle against an Orc War and achieves a flawless victory. But when she returns to her sept, she finds that her fellow Ta'au no longer speak to her. They do not shun her out of malice. They simply do not see at her. She has become invisible to her own people, and she does not know why. The answer is that she questioned an ethereal's command. Just once, just for a moment. It was enough. The greater good does not tolerate questions. The Eldari, both Craftworld and Drukhari, exist in a state of perpetual torment. The Craftworld Eldari cling to their dying culture with a desperation that has long since passed from noble to pathetic. Their infinity circuits, once repositories of ancestral wisdom, have become prisons where the dead scream in languages the living can no longer understand. The Farseers who guide their people see only one future, and it is a future where they are consumed by she who thirsts, slowly, agonizingly, forever. They make decisions to delay that fate, but every decision brings it closer. A Farseer weaves a skein of fate to save her Craftworld from destruction, and she succeeds. The Craftworld survives, but the cost is the souls of every child born in the next generation, and she knew this when she made her choice. She tells herself it was necessary. She tells herself the young would have died anyway. She does not tell herself the truth, which is that she chose her own survival over theirs, and in doing so, she has become what she hates most. The Drukhari have embraced their damnation with a fervor that would be admirable if it were not so vile. Komorog still stands, still thrives, but it is no longer a city. It is an organism, a living thing that feeds on suffering and excretes misery. The cabals wage their wars, the cults perform their rituals, the covens conduct their experiments, but there is no innovation, no ambition, no desire beyond the immediate gratification of the next raid, the next torture, the next fleeting moment of pleasure. A homunculus in the depths of a flesh foundry creates a masterpiece, a sculpture of living meat and screaming bone that perfectly encapsulates the nature of agony. He stands before it, and for the first time in the millennia, he feels nothing. No pride, no satisfaction, no joy. He has reached the end of sensation, and all that remains is the mechanical repetition of acts that no longer bring pleasure. He will continue. He has no choice. Stopping would require the capacity for despair, and despair is an emotion he excised from himself centuries ago. The orcs, at least, remain true to themselves. They fight because fighting is what they do, and in a galaxy where chaos has won every war, there is no shortage of fighting. But even they have changed. The Wa is no longer a joyous thing, no longer an expression of pure, unthinking violence. It has become ritualistic, repetitive, mechanical. A warboss leads his horde into battle and crushes the humies with brutal efficiency. But when the battle is over, he does not feel the satisfaction of a good scrap. His boys look to him for orders, and he gives them because that is what a warboss does, but he no longer remembers why. The orcs have become what they were always meant to be, and in doing so, they have lost the one thing that made them truly dangerous. They have lost their unpredictability. Even the greenskins, creatures of pure violence and joy, have been reduced to going through the motions. The Necrons awaken to a galaxy that has already ended. They emerge from their tomb worlds, expecting to find a cosmos to reclaim, a silent kingdom to rule. But what they find is a reality where silence is impossible. The chaos taint has seeped into the very fabric of space-time, and even the unliving are not immune. A Necron overlord surveys his dynasty and finds that his warriors are no longer perfectly obedient. They hesitate, they falter, they act with something that resembles individual will, and this is more horrifying to him than any flesh curse could be. He orders their systems purged, their engrams wiped, their consciousness reset to baseline parameters. It does not work. The corruption is not in their code, it is in the universe, in itself. He realizes, with a clarity that his immortal mind cannot escape, that the Silent King led them into slumber to escape the war in heaven, but they have awakened into something worse. They sought to escape one apocalypse and slept through the birth of another. The Tyranids hunger, but their hunger has changed. The hive mind, that vast and incomprehensible intelligence that guides the swarms, has begun to fracture. It still seeks biomass, still consumes worlds, still spreads across the galaxy like a plague, but it no longer does so with purpose. A hive fleet descends upon a world and strips it bare, but instead of moving on, it remains, circling the dead planet, its bioships drifting in orbit, their hunger unabated despite the absence of anything to consume. The synapse creatures that control the lesser organisms begin to fight among themselves, their connection to the hive mind deteriorating, their instincts pulling them in contradictory directions. A hive tyrant tears apart a carnifex that failed to obey its commands, and in doing so, it does not restore order, it creates chaos. The Tyranids, the ultimate expression of biological efficiency, have become inefficient, and they do not know why. Even the great devourer chokes on the corruption it consumes. In the Eye of Terror, the Daemon princes and chaos lords who once dreamed of conquest have discovered that conquest is meaningless when there is nothing left to conquer. The Daemon worlds still exist, still churn with impossible geometries and ever-shifting landscapes, but they are no longer novel. A Daemon prince of Tsiench sits upon a throne of screaming faces and contemplates the nature of change, but he has seen every possible permutation of reality, has witnessed every scheme brought to fruition, and he knows that change is an illusion. Everything that happens has already happened. Everything that will happen has already been seen. He is immortal, and immortality is not a gift. It is a sentence. A champion of Khorne wades through a sea of blood, his axe rising and falling with metronomic precision, but the skulls he takes no longer satisfy. There are too many. The skull throne is full. There is no room for glory when glory has become mundane. A servant of Nurgle spreads disease with the devotion of a true believer. But even plague has lost its novelty. Every virus has been catalogued, every mutation documented, every form of decay experienced and incorporated into the endless cycle of rot. The Plaguefather's garden is full, and there is nowhere left to plant new infections. A Slaaneshi cultist pursues sensation with increasing desperation, but pleasure has a ceiling, and beyond that ceiling is only numbness. They have consumed every experience, tasted every excess, felt every possible permutation of ecstasy and agony, and now there is nothing left but the hollow repetition of acts that once brought transcendence. The Chaos Gods themselves have grown bored. They have won in war, claimed every soul, corrupted every virtue, and in doing so, they have discovered that victory is hollow. On the mortal worlds that have fallen to chaos worship, the population does not revel in their newfound freedom. They suffer. The cultists who once believed that serving the ruinous powers would grant them transcendence have discovered that transcendence is just another word for annihilation. A man who pledged himself to Slaanesh, seeking the ultimate pleasure, finds that each new sensation brings him less satisfaction than the last. He will never stop. Stopping would require the admission that he was wrong, and he has sacrificed too much to entertain that possibility. A woman who turned to Nurgle in the hope of escaping death discovers that undeath is worse. Her body continues to function, continues to decay, continues to regenerate in a cycle that never ends. She feels every moment of it. The pain does not fade. It accumulates. She begs for release, but there is no one to hear her prayers. And yet, even now, false hope appears in small, fleeting moments. A chapter master receives a vision of the Emperor, a vision so pure and clear that he weeps with joy. The vision tells him where to strike, how to reclaim a system from the grip of chaos, how to restore order to a sector that has been lost for centuries. He follows the vision's guidance, and it works. The campaign is a success. The worlds are liberated. The people rejoice. The chapter master kneels in the ruins of a corrupted temple and thanks the Emperor for his guidance. For a fleeting moment, it seems salvation has come. 3 months later, the first signs of mutation appear among the liberated population. 6 months later, daemons walk openly in the streets. The chapter master realizes, too late, that the vision was not from the Emperor. It was a test, and he failed. He gathers his battle brothers and orders them to enact exterminatus on the worlds they saved. They obey, because obedience is all they have left. The chapter master puts a bolt round through his own skull, and his final thought is that he should have known. He should have seen it coming. But that is the nature of false hope. It looks exactly like the real thing until it destroys you. A PDF trooper on a world besieged by chaos cultists holds the line for 72 hours without sleep, without food, without reinforcement. He believes that if he can just hold on a little longer, the Astra Militarum will arrive. They will bring salvation. On the 73rd hour, the sky opens, and drop pods descend. The trooper weeps with relief. The Space Marines have come. The warriors who emerge from the pods wear the colors of a chapter he does not recognize, but they are angels of death, and that is all that matters. They cut through the cultists with brutal efficiency, and within hours, the siege is broken. The trooper approaches one of the Space Marines to offer his thanks, and the warrior removes his helmet. The face, beneath, is beautiful and terrible, serene and mad, human and utterly alien. The Space Marine smiles, and in that smile, the trooper sees the truth. These are not saviors. The last thing he hears is the Space Marine whispering a benediction in a language that makes his ears bleed. An inquisitor uncovers a conspiracy within the Administratum, a network of corruption so vast that it spans dozens of sectors. She spends decades gathering evidence, building her case, preparing to strike. When she finally makes her move, it is flawless. She arrests the conspirators, exposes their crimes, dismantles their infrastructure. The High Lords of Terror commend her for her service. She is granted a new rosette, a new mandate, new resources. She believes she has won. But the conspiracy was a distraction. While she was chasing shadows, the real threat was growing elsewhere, and it grew because she was not watching. The network she destroyed was a rival Chaos faction, one that was holding another faction in check. With it gone, the floodgates open. A subsector falls to Chaos worship within a year. The Inquisitor tries to respond, but her resources are stretched thin, her allies are compromised, and she is tired. So very tired. She makes a decision. She will make a pact, just this once, just to get the power she needs to save the subsector. The voice that offers her the pact is kind. It understands her burden. It promises that the cost will be small. She accepts, and the subsector is saved. The cost is her soul, but she does not know this yet. She will spend the next century convinced that she is still serving the Emperor, and every action she takes will further the goals of the ruinous powers. She will never know. That is the mercy Chaos grants to those who serve it well. The Black Templars wage an eternal crusade, as they have always done, but their zeal has become indistinguishable from madness. They no longer seek to reclaim worlds. They seek to punish them. A marshal leads his strike force to a hive world that has shown signs of heresy, and he does not investigate. He does not offer the population a chance to repent. He simply begins the slaughter. Billions die. The marshal watches the fires rise from orbit, and his chaplain tells him this is normal, that the Emperor's work is its own reward, that the absence of feeling is a sign of purity. The marshal believes this because he has no other choice. To doubt would be to admit that he has become the very thing he was meant to destroy. A lone guardsman sits in the ruins of a trench, surrounded by the corpses of his comrades, and he laughs. He laughs because he has realized the truth. There is no winning. There is no survival. There is only the next order, the next battle, the next meaningless death. He laughs because the alternative is to weep, and weeping requires the belief that things could have been different. They could not. This was always where it was leading. He raises his lasgun to his car, temple, and he hesitates. Not because he wants to live. He does not. But because even this final act of defiance feels pointless. He pulls the trigger anyway. The lasgun does not fire. The power cell is dead. He throws the weapon aside and waits for the enemy to come. They do not. He sits in the trench for 3 days, and no one comes. On the 4th day, he realizes that he is already dead. His body is still functioning, his heart is still beating, but he is no longer alive in any way that matters. He stands up and walks away from the trench, and no one stops him. There is nowhere left to go. The Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guard, stand vigil over the golden throne, but the throne is silent. They do not speak of this. To speak of it would be to acknowledge it, and acknowledgement would be heresy. They stand in their golden armor, 10,000 strong, the greatest warriors humanity has ever produced, and they do nothing. They cannot act, because to act would require orders, and there are no orders. The Emperor does not speak. He has not spoken in millennia. Some of the Custodes believe he is testing them, that this silence is a trial they must endure. Others believe he is dead, that the golden throne is nothing but a coffin, that they are guarding a corpse. They do not voice these thoughts. They stand, they wait, they watch. And in the deepest, darkest parts of the imperial palace, in chambers where even the Custodes do not go, something is growing. It is not a daemon, it is not a mutant. It is something that was once human, something that has been fed on the despair of an entire species, something that has grown fat on the slow death of hope. It does not need to fight the Custodes. It simply needs to wait. They will come to it eventually. They always do. On a forgotten world at the edge of the galaxy, a tech priest makes a discovery. Buried beneath the ruins of a pre-imperial civilization, he finds a device, a machine of such complexity that it makes even the most advanced Mechanicus technology look primitive. He studies it for years, deciphering its function, understanding its purpose. It is a beacon, a signal that reaches across the galaxy, across dimensions, across realities. It has been broadcasting for millennia, and no one has ever answered. The tech priest activates it, believing that it might summon aid, might bring salvation to the Imperium in its darkest hour. The signal goes out, something answers. It is not salvation. It is something that has been waiting beyond the edge of reality, something that has been listening to the beacon, something that is older and more terrible than chaos itself. The tech priest realizes his mistake in the instant before his mind is obliterated. In the end, there is no final battle. There is no climactic confrontation between the forces of order and the legions of chaos. There is only the slow, grinding attrition of reality itself. The Imperium continues to exist because the concept of existence has become so degraded that even non-existence is indistinguishable from it. People are born, they live, they die, and none of it matters. The wars continue because war is all that remains, because the machinery of conflict has become so entrenched that it cannot be stopped even when there is no longer a purpose to it. This is the reality where chaos has won every war. It is not a reality of constant battle and heroic last stands. It is a reality of apathy and despair, where the very concept of struggle has been stripped of meaning. It is a reality where hope is not crushed in a single moment of defeat, but eroded slowly, grain by grain, until there is nothing left but the empty shell of what once was. It is a reality where the greatest horror is not the presence of chaos, but the absence of anything else. There are no heroes here. There are no villains. There are only the hollow remnants of beings who once believed that what they did mattered, and who now know, with absolute certainty, that it never did. The galaxy continues to turn. Stars are born and stars die. Worlds rise and worlds fall. And through it all, the only constant is the knowledge that nothing will ever change. This is not the end. The end would be a mercy. This is the eternity that comes after the end. The unending present where time has lost all meaning and existence has become a prison from which there is no escape. The Chaos Gods have won every war, and in doing so, they have created a hell that even they cannot escape. They are trapped in their victory, condemned to rule over a cosmos that no longer cares, that no longer resists, that simply endures because it has forgotten how to do anything else. And in the darkness between the stars, something watches. It is not chaos. It is not the Emperor. It is something that has no name, no form, no purpose. It is the absence of all things, the void that exists beneath reality, and it is patient. It has watched civilizations rise and fall. It has watched gods be born and die. It has watched the galaxy tear itself apart and rebuild itself 1,000 times. And it knows, with a certainty that transcends knowledge, that this too shall pass. Chaos has won every war, but the void is eternal. It will wait. It has all the time in the universe. The golden throne sits empty and cold, a silent testament to the failure of hope and the triumph of despair. There is no redemption here. There is no salvation. There is only the endless, grinding continuation of existence without purpose, life without meaning, war without end. This is the true horror of Chaos Ascendant. Not that it destroys, but that it transforms destruction itself into a state of being from which there is no escape. The galaxy has become a tomb, and in the silence that follows, something darker than chaos begins to stir.